I still remember that morning like it happened yesterday. It was our 5th wedding anniversary. For most people, it was just another date on the calendar. For me, it was everything. I woke up before sunrise with a smile on my face because I wanted this day to be perfect. Olivia had always been busy as a major in the military, but I believed that no matter how demanding her job became, our anniversary would always matter to both of us. I cleaned the house from top to bottom. Then I went to the flower shop and bought her favorite white lilies. On the way home, I stopped at her favorite bakery and picked up the chocolate cake she always loved. While driving back, I kept remembering the day we got married. She had smiled at me and whispered, "No matter where the military sends us, we'll always come back to each other." Back then, I believed every single word. When I reached home, I started cooking dinner myself. Every dish on the table was something she loved. I even opened the expensive bottle of wine we had been saving for a special day. I looked around the dining room and smiled. Everything was ready. Then I looked at my wrist. I was wearing the military watch Olivia had given me after my first successful mission. She once told me, "As long as you're wearing this, you'll always know where your home is." I touched the watch and quietly laughed. "I never took it off," I whispered. Around noon, my phone rang. It was Olivia. "Hey," she said quickly. "I'm so sorry. Today's schedule is crazy, but don't worry. I'll be home before sunset." I smiled. "I'll be waiting. I love you." There was a short pause. Then she answered softly, "I love you too." The call ended. I spent the next few hours checking everything again. The candles were ready. The flowers looked perfect. The food stayed warm inside the oven. Every few minutes I looked at the clock. 5 o'clock. Then 6. Sunset arrived. The house stayed silent. I picked up my phone. No messages. No calls. I told myself she was probably driving. Another 30 minutes passed. Still nothing. Finally, my phone buzzed. My heart jumped. But it wasn't the message I expected. "I'm sorry. Emergency meeting. I'll be late. Don't wait for me." That was all. No anniversary. No apology. No explanation. Just 4 cold sentences. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I quietly sat back down. Maybe she really was working. Maybe I was overthinking. Military life was unpredictable. I understood that better than anyone. So I decided to wait. 1 more hour. Then another. The food became cold. The candles melted. The flowers slowly began to lose their freshness. The silence inside the house became louder than any battlefield I had ever experienced. To distract myself, I opened my phone and started scrolling through social media. Then, everything stopped. Someone from the military had uploaded photos from a welcome celebration held that same evening. I tapped the first picture, then the second, then the third. My breathing slowed. There she was, Olivia. She wasn't sitting in a meeting room. She wasn't surrounded by officers discussing urgent operations. She was smiling, standing beside Captain Ryan Brooks, the man she had once planned to marry before he disappeared years ago. They looked comfortable, happy, like 2 people reconnecting after losing each other. I kept swiping through the pictures, hoping the next one would explain everything. Instead, every new photo hurt even more. People were laughing. Ryan was standing close beside her. She looked happier than I had seen her in months. I whispered to myself, "No, there has to be another explanation." But deep inside, a quiet voice answered me, "You already know the truth." I locked my phone and looked around the room. The candles were still burning. The dinner was untouched. 2 glasses stood on the table. One for her, one for me. Only one of us had shown up. I slowly reached forward and picked up the anniversary photo from our wedding day. I smiled at the 2 people inside that picture. They looked so happy, so certain, so in love. I barely recognized them anymore. Then I leaned forward, blew out the candles, and whispered into the darkness. Maybe I was the only one celebrating today. The morning after our forgotten anniversary, I kept telling myself the photos meant nothing. Maybe I had misunderstood. Maybe Ryan Brooks was only an old friend. Maybe I was letting one painful night destroy years of trust. That was the lie I wanted to believe. But reality didn't wait very long. 2 days later, the entire military base was buzzing with excitement. Captain Ryan Brooks is back. He finally returned. I heard he completed classified overseas missions. He'll probably be promoted again. His name was everywhere. As I walked across the base, I could hear soldiers talking about him with admiration. To them, Ryan wasn't just another officer. He was a war hero. When I entered headquarters, I saw officers gathering near the entrance. Then I saw him. Ryan Brooks. He looked exactly like the man I remembered from old photographs Olivia once showed me years ago. Tall, confident, always smiling. The kind of man who made everyone around him feel important. Before I could look away, Olivia walked toward him. For a second, neither of them spoke. Then Ryan smiled. "It's really you." Olivia smiled back. "I never thought I'd see you again." They shook hands. But somehow, that handshake lasted longer than it should have. I stood there quietly. Neither of them noticed me. Ryan laughed. "You haven't changed at all." Olivia laughed too. "You still say the same things." Hearing her laugh like that surprised me. I couldn't remember the last time she laughed that freely with me. A moment later, Olivia finally turned around. "Oh, you're here." She walked over and gently touched my arm. "This is my husband." Ryan extended his hand. "It's an honor to finally meet you." I forced a smile and shook it. "The honor is mine." Everything sounded polite. Everything looked normal. But something inside me felt strangely uncomfortable. That evening, I asked Olivia about him. "So, Ryan's back." She nodded while putting away her uniform. "Yes. You seem happy." She smiled. "We were close friends before everything changed." I waited. She didn't say anything else. "That's all." She looked at me. "What do you mean?" "I don't know. I guess I just expected you to tell me more." She sighed. "You're overthinking. Ryan is part of my past. My future is with you." Those words should have comforted me. Instead, they somehow felt rehearsed. Over the next week, little things began changing. Nothing dramatic. Nothing I could prove. Just small moments that quietly piled on top of each other. Her phone rang more often. Sometimes she stepped outside before answering. Sometimes she smiled while reading messages. When I asked who it was, she answered casually. "Just work." One evening I said, "Dinner's ready." She looked at her phone and replied, "I'll eat later. Ryan needs help preparing tomorrow's briefing." I nodded. "Okay." But dinner became cold before she came home. Again. Days later, I walked past the training grounds. I wasn't looking for anyone. Yet I saw them together. Ryan and Olivia were talking near the obstacle course. They weren't standing like co-workers. They looked comfortable, like two people who didn't need words to understand each other. Ryan said something I couldn't hear. Olivia laughed. That same laugh. The one I thought belonged to me. I quietly turned around before either of them noticed. That afternoon, Sergeant Mason Reed found me sitting alone outside the barracks. He sat beside me without saying anything. After a minute, he finally spoke. "You okay?" I shrugged. "I've been better." He looked at me carefully. "I don't usually interfere in other people's marriages. But you're my friend." I stayed silent. He lowered his voice. "People are talking." I looked at him. "Talking about what?" He hesitated. "About Olivia and Ryan." I immediately shook my head. "No, they're just old friends." Mason sighed. "I hope you're right. But rumors don't appear from nowhere." His words stayed in my mind long after he left. I wanted to ignore them. I wanted to believe everyone was wrong. Because accepting the truth felt impossible. A few nights later, the base held a welcome celebration for Ryan. Music filled the officers' hall. Everyone gathered around him. He stood confidently with a drink in his hand, smiling as people asked about his overseas missions. Then someone shouted, "Tell us about Olivia." The room laughed. Ryan grinned. "Oh, that's a dangerous story." Olivia smiled but didn't stop him. Ryan looked around the room. "Years ago, everyone thought we'd end up getting married." More laughter. Someone whistled. Ryan continued. "Life had other plans." He glanced toward Olivia. "But some connections never really disappear." The room laughed again. I forced myself to smile. Inside, every word felt like another knife sliding deeper into my chest. Nobody noticed the pain behind my expression. Nobody saw my hands trembling beneath the table. I looked at Olivia. She wasn't laughing loudly, but she wasn't stopping him either. For the first time since we exchanged our wedding vows, a question entered my mind that terrified me. I looked at the woman I had loved with everything I had. Then I silently asked myself, was I slowly losing my wife? Or had I already lost her long before I realized it? The morning after our forgotten anniversary, I kept telling myself the photos meant nothing. Maybe I had misunderstood. Maybe Ryan Brooks was only an old friend. Maybe I was letting one painful night destroy years of trust. That was the lie I wanted to believe. But reality didn't wait very long. 2 days later, the entire military base was buzzing with excitement. Captain Ryan Brooks is back. He finally returned. I heard he completed classified overseas missions. He'll probably be promoted again. His name was everywhere. As I walked across the base, I could hear soldiers talking about him with admiration. To them, Ryan wasn't just another officer. He was a war hero. When I entered headquarters, I saw officers gathering near the entrance. Then I saw him, Ryan Brooks. He looked exactly like the man I remembered from old photographs Olivia once showed me years ago. Tall, confident, always smiling. The kind of man who made everyone around him feel important. Before I could look away, Olivia walked toward him. For a second, neither of them spoke. Then Ryan smiled. "It's really you." Olivia smiled back. "I never thought I'd see you again." They shook hands. But somehow, that handshake lasted longer than it should have. I stood there quietly. Neither of them noticed me. Ryan laughed. "You haven't changed at all." Olivia laughed too. "You still say the same things." Hearing her laugh like that surprised me. I couldn't remember the last time she laughed that freely with me. A moment later, Olivia finally turned around. "Oh, you're here." She walked over and gently touched my arm. "This is my husband." Ryan extended his hand. "It's an honor to finally meet you." I forced a smile and shook it. "The honor is mine." Everything sounded polite. Everything looked normal. But something inside me felt strangely uncomfortable. That evening, I asked Olivia about him. "So, Ryan's back." She nodded while putting away her uniform. "Yes. You seem happy." She smiled. "We were close friends before everything changed." I waited. She didn't say anything else. "That's all." She looked at me. "What do you mean?" "I don't know. I guess I just expected you to tell me more." She sighed. "You're overthinking. Ryan is part of my past. My future is with you." Those words should have comforted me. Instead, they somehow felt rehearsed. Over the next week, little things began changing. Nothing dramatic. Nothing I could prove. Just small moments that quietly piled on top of each other. Her phone rang more often. Sometimes she stepped outside before answering. Sometimes she smiled while reading messages. When I asked who it was, she answered casually. "Just work." One evening I said, "Dinner's ready." She looked at her phone and replied, "I'll eat later. Ryan needs help preparing tomorrow's briefing." I nodded. "Okay." But dinner became cold before she came home. Again. Days later, I walked past the training grounds. I wasn't looking for anyone, yet I saw them together. Ryan and Olivia were talking near the obstacle course. They weren't standing like co-workers. They looked comfortable, like two people who didn't need words to understand each other. Ryan said something I couldn't hear. Olivia laughed. That same laugh. The one I thought belonged to me. I quietly turned around before either of them noticed. That afternoon, Sergeant Mason Reed found me sitting alone outside the barracks. He sat beside me without saying anything. After a minute, he finally spoke. "You okay?" I shrugged. "I've been better." He looked at me carefully. "I don't usually interfere in other people's marriages. But you're my friend." I stayed silent. He lowered his voice. "People are talking." I looked at him. "Talking about what?" He hesitated. "About Olivia and Ryan." I immediately shook my head. "No, they're just old friends." Mason sighed. "I hope you're right. But rumors don't appear from nowhere." His words stayed in my mind long after he left. I wanted to ignore them. I wanted to believe everyone was wrong. Because accepting the truth felt impossible. A few nights later, the base held a welcome celebration for Ryan. Music filled the officers' hall. Everyone gathered around him. He stood confidently with a drink in his hand, smiling as people asked about his overseas missions. Then someone shouted, "Tell us about Olivia." The room laughed. Ryan grinned. "Oh, that's a dangerous story." Olivia smiled but didn't stop him. Ryan looked around the room. "Years ago, everyone thought we'd end up getting married." More laughter. Someone whistled. Ryan continued. "Life had other plans." He glanced toward Olivia. "But some connections never really disappear." The room laughed again. I forced myself to smile. Inside, every word felt like another knife sliding deeper into my chest. Nobody noticed the pain behind my expression. Nobody saw my hands trembling beneath the table. I looked at Olivia. She wasn't laughing loudly, but she wasn't stopping him either. For the first time since we exchanged our wedding vows, a question entered my mind that terrified me. I looked at the woman I had loved with everything I had. Then I silently asked myself, was I slowly losing my wife? Or had I already lost her long before I realized it? After the welcome party, I stopped asking questions. Not because my doubts had disappeared, because I was afraid of the answers. Every morning, Olivia kissed my cheek before leaving for work. Every night, She came home looking more tired than usual. She still called me love. She still asked how my day had been. From the outside, we looked like the same married couple we had always been. But something between us had quietly changed. It wasn't one big moment. It was 1,000 tiny moments. The late-night messages, the unexpected meetings, the smiles she no longer shared with me, and the silence that kept growing inside our home. I kept telling myself that trust meant believing even when things became difficult. I wanted to be that kind of husband. The husband who didn't jump to conclusions. The husband who stood beside his wife no matter what. But fate had something else planned. One Saturday morning, Olivia rushed out of the house. "I'm already late," she called from the front door. "I'll see you tonight." The door closed. A few minutes later, I noticed her tablet lying on the living room table. I picked it up. She forgot this. I reached for my phone, planning to call her. Before I could dial, the screen lit up. A new message appeared. From Ryan. I wasn't trying to invade her privacy. I hadn't unlocked anything. The message appeared right there on the screen, and the words stole the air from my lungs. "Soon we won't have to hide anymore." My hand froze. For several seconds, I couldn't even breathe. There had to be an explanation. There had to be. Slowly, almost against my own will, I unlocked the tablet using the code I had known for years. I told myself I would read only enough to understand. Nothing more. But the first conversation shattered everything. Ryan had written, "I never stopped loving you." Olivia replied, "Things aren't that simple." Ryan answered, "You only married him because I disappeared." I stared at the screen, waiting, praying, begging to see her deny those words. Instead, she typed, "Maybe you're right." My chest tightened. I kept scrolling. Every message hurt more than the one before it. Ryan talked about the future they could still have together. He reminded her of old memories, old promises, old dreams. And Olivia, she never told him to stop. She never said, "I love my husband." She never said, "Leave me alone." Instead, she wrote, "Sometimes I miss what we had." Another message, "I'm confused." Another one, "I don't know what my heart wants anymore." My hands began shaking so badly that I almost dropped the tablet. Months. They had been talking for months. Private dinners, coffee after work, walks around the base, late-night phone calls, excuses. Every strange moment suddenly made sense. Every doubt I had buried came rushing back at once. I leaned back on the couch and closed my eyes. The room felt strangely quiet. Not peaceful, empty, like someone had already taken everything that mattered from me. I whispered, "Why?" No one answered. Hours passed before I heard the front door open. Olivia walked inside carrying groceries. She smiled. I forgot my tablet. Then she looked at me. My face must have told her everything. Her smile disappeared. She slowly placed the grocery bags on the floor. "You read them." It wasn't a question. I nodded once. Neither of us spoke. The silence became unbearable. Finally, I stood up. Every word felt heavier than the last. "I only want to ask you one thing." She looked down. I took one slow breath. Then I asked the question that had been destroying me for days. "Do you still love him?" She didn't answer. She simply stood there, her eyes filled with tears, but her lips never moved. I waited. 5 seconds. 10 seconds. 15. Nothing. I asked again, "Olivia, do you still love Ryan?" She closed her eyes. Her voice broke. "I don't know." Those 4 words hit harder than any bullet I had ever faced. Because they told me everything. If she truly loved me, she would have answered without hesitation. If Ryan meant nothing, she would have said so immediately. Instead, she stood frozen between 2 lives. Between her past and the husband standing in front of her. Tears rolled down her face. "I'm sorry. I never wanted to hurt you." I laughed softly. Not because anything was funny. Because my heart had finally reached the point where it couldn't hurt anymore. "You already did." She stepped toward me. I was confused. I slowly shook my head. "No. You made choices. They weren't accidents. They happened again and again." She covered her face and began crying. I didn't know how to stop. I looked at the woman I had trusted with my entire life. The woman who once promised that no distance, no mission, and no hardship would ever come between us. Now, the greatest distance wasn't measured in miles. It was measured in silence. I realized something painful in that moment. Sometimes betrayal doesn't begin with a kiss. Sometimes it begins with a conversation that should have ended long ago. And as Olivia stood there without an answer to the only question that truly mattered, I felt my marriage slipping through my fingers. Not because another man had stolen my wife, but because somewhere along the way, she had quietly stopped choosing me. That night, neither of us said much after our conversation. Olivia cried quietly in the bedroom. I stayed alone in the living room. The silence between us felt heavier than any argument. There was nothing left to explain, nothing left to defend. The truth had already spoken for both of us. I sat there for hours, staring at our wedding photo. Two smiling faces. Two people who believed love could survive anything. I barely recognized the man in that picture anymore. Around midnight, I heard the bedroom door close. Olivia had finally fallen asleep. For a long moment, I simply sat there. Part of me wanted to walk into the bedroom, wake her up, ask her to fight for us, ask her to choose me. But another part of me already knew the answer. Love should never have to compete. Not with another person. Not with someone's memories. Not with unfinished feelings from the past. I stood up quietly, walked into the bedroom. She was sleeping peacefully. Her face looked calm, almost innocent. For a second, I remembered the young woman I had fallen in love with years ago. The woman who waited for me after long deployments. The woman who once held my hand and promised we would always face life together. I smiled sadly. Then I whispered, "I hope you find whatever you're looking for." She never heard me. I opened the closet, pulled out one travel bag, and packed only what I truly needed. A few uniforms, some civilian clothes, important documents. My military medals stayed behind. The expensive gifts stayed behind. Even most of my memories stayed behind. When the bag was full, I looked at my left hand. My wedding ring. For 5 years. I had never taken it off. Slowly, I removed it. The skin beneath it looked strangely pale, like a part of me had been hidden for years. I walked into the dining room. The anniversary photo still sat on the table. Beside it, I carefully placed my wedding ring. Then I picked up a small piece of paper. I thought about writing everything I felt. The pain, the disappointment, the unanswered questions. Instead, I wrote only one sentence. I won't compete for someone's heart. Nothing more. No anger. No accusations. No goodbye. Just the truth. Before sunrise, I quietly walked out of the house. I didn't look back, because I knew if I did, I might lose the strength to leave. The cold morning air hit my face as I drove toward military headquarters. Every mile felt strangely peaceful. Painful, but peaceful. For the first time in weeks. I wasn't pretending everything was okay. I walked directly into Colonel Harrison's office. He looked up from his paperwork. "You look exhausted." I nodded. "I need to request an immediate transfer." He frowned. "That's unexpected. Why now?" For several seconds, I couldn't answer. Not because I wanted to hide the truth. Because saying it out loud would make everything real. Finally, I spoke. "My marriage is over." The colonel remained silent. He had spent decades leading soldiers. He knew the difference between physical wounds and invisible ones. He slowly leaned back in his chair. "Is this because of Captain Brooks?" I looked down. "I don't want special treatment. I just need distance." He studied my face for a long moment. Then he quietly signed the transfer request. "I'll approve it today." I looked at him in surprise. "You aren't going to ask more questions?" He shook his head. "A soldier who asks for help before breaking deserves respect." Those words nearly brought tears to my eyes. I stood and saluted him. "Thank you, sir." As I turned toward the door, he stopped me. "You've always served with honor. Don't let someone else's mistakes convince you that your loyalty was a weakness." I nodded once. "I won't." By afternoon, I was already on my way to another military intelligence division hundreds of miles away. No farewell party. No announcements. Just another officer quietly disappearing. A few hours later, my phone started ringing. "Olivia." I watched her name appear on the screen. I didn't answer. A minute later, she called again. Then again. Then again. Messages began arriving one after another. "Please answer." "Where are you?" "We need to talk." "I'm sorry. Please come home." I read every message, but I never replied. Because there was nothing left to say. Words had already failed us. The next morning, she called even more. Voicemails, text messages, emails. Each one sounded more desperate than the last. For years, whenever she needed me, I answered. This time, silence became my answer. Not because I wanted revenge, not because I wanted her to suffer, but because I finally understood something important. Some lessons cannot be explained. They have to be felt. For the first time since we met, Olivia walked into an empty house. She saw the wedding ring resting beside our anniversary photo. She read the single sentence I had left behind, and she finally experienced the silence I had been living with for months. As my car disappeared down the highway toward a new assignment, I realized I wasn't running away. I was choosing myself for the first time in years. And sometimes, the hardest goodbye is the one spoken without a single word. Leaving my old life behind didn't erase the pain. It simply gave me a place where I could finally face it. The first few weeks at my new assignment were the hardest. Every morning, I woke up expecting to hear Olivia's voice. Every evening, I reached for my phone before remembering there was no reason to call. Some habits don't disappear overnight. They fade one painful day at a time. So I made myself a promise. If I couldn't control what had happened, I could control who I became after it. I threw myself into work. Before sunrise, I was already on the training field. When everyone else finished, I stayed longer. I ran farther. I trained harder. I pushed myself until every muscle burned. The physical pain became easier to handle than the emptiness inside my heart. One afternoon, my commanding officer stopped me after a training exercise. "You've been working harder than anyone here." I smiled politely. "I'm just staying busy, sir." He nodded. "Keep this up, and promotion won't be far away." For the first time in months, someone noticed my effort instead of my pain. Weeks turned into months. Mission after mission, I proved myself again. The confidence I thought I had lost slowly returned. Not because life became easier, but because I stopped measuring my worth by someone else's choices. As part of our recovery program, every returning officer attended regular counseling sessions. At first, I hated the idea. Talking about emotions had never been easy for me. Still, attendance was mandatory. That's where I met Emma Sullivan. She wasn't a soldier. She was a military psychologist who had spent years helping wounded service members rebuild their lives. During our first meeting, she smiled warmly and asked, "So, why do you think you're here?" I answered without thinking, "Because it's required." She laughed softly. "No, that's why you're in this room." I asked why you think you need to be here. I stayed quiet. She waited patiently. Finally, I admitted, "Because I don't know how to stop carrying what happened." Emma nodded. "That's honest." Then she said something I would never forget. Healing isn't forgetting, and it isn't pretending you're okay. Healing is choosing not to let your worst day become the rest of your life. Her words stayed with me long after our session ended. Little by little, I stopped seeing myself as a victim. I started seeing myself as someone who had survived. Months later, I received my first promotion. The ceremony was simple. No loud celebration. No cameras. Just a handshake and a few sincere words from my commander. "You earned this." For the first time in a long while, I believed him. Meanwhile, life at my former base was changing in ways I never expected. I only learned about it because Sergeant Mason called one evening. "You won't believe what's happening." I frowned. "What is it?" He lowered his voice. "Military investigators have started looking into Ryan." My heart didn't race. I didn't smile. I simply listened. "They're checking procurement records. Some contracts don't make sense. Nobody knows how deep it goes yet." The investigator leading the case was Daniel Foster, a man known for one thing. He never accused anyone without evidence. If Daniel was involved, the situation was serious. A few weeks later, Mason called again. "This keeps getting worse." "What happened?" Ethan Brooks came forward. "Ryan's younger brother?" "Yeah." He told investigators Ryan has always chased power. He doesn't care who gets hurt. He only cares about promotions, influence, and getting closer to senior command. I closed my eyes. Everything suddenly fit together. Ryan hadn't returned because he missed Olivia. He had returned because reconnecting with respected officers opened important doors. And Olivia, she had become another opportunity. Not the love of his life. Just another step toward the career he wanted. The truth spread quietly through the base. More questions followed. More interviews. More documents. Then Mason told me something that stayed with me for days. "Olivia finally knows." I didn't answer. He continued. "She found out Ryan lied to her. He was meeting other people, using her name, making promises he never intended to keep." I looked out the window. The sky was calm. "So, how is she?" Mason sighed. "Broken. She keeps saying she never saw the real Ryan." I whispered. "Neither did I." Silence filled the call. Finally, Mason asked, "Does hearing this make you feel better?" I thought carefully before answering. "No, it doesn't. I never wanted her to suffer. I only wanted her to choose us." After we hung up, I sat alone for a long time. I realized something important. Real karma doesn't arrive with shouting. It doesn't announce itself. It simply lets people live with the consequences of the choices they made. I hadn't exposed Ryan. I hadn't asked anyone to investigate him. I hadn't tried to destroy Olivia's career. Life had done all of that without my help. Emma once told me, the healthiest revenge is building a life that no longer depends on the people who hurt you. For the first time, I truly understood what she meant. While I rebuilt my confidence, their perfect future quietly fell apart. Piece by piece, lie by lie, choice by choice. And as I looked toward the future instead of the past, I realized something that filled my heart with unexpected peace. Sometimes, the strongest victory isn't watching someone else lose. It's waking up one morning and realizing they no longer have the power to control your happiness. Almost a year had passed since I walked away. By then, I had stopped checking Olivia's social media. I had stopped wondering who she was with. I had stopped replaying old memories before going to sleep. Life finally felt steady. Then one morning, my commanding officer called me into his office. I need you to travel back to your former base. I looked at him. Is something wrong, sir? He nodded. The investigation has become official. Your testimony has been requested. For a moment, I simply sat there. I had spent months building a new life. Now the past was calling me back. Not as a husband, not as a victim, but as a witness. A few days later, I walked into the military courthouse. The building looked exactly the same. Only I had changed. Outside the hearing room, I saw familiar faces. Some soldiers smiled politely. Others avoided eye contact. Rumors had spread across the entire command. Everyone knew why we were there. When I entered the courtroom, my eyes found Olivia almost immediately. She looked different. The confident major I remembered was gone. Dark circles rested beneath her eyes. Her shoulders seemed heavier. For the first time since our marriage ended, she couldn't even look at me. Then I saw Ryan. He still wore his uniform. He still tried to look confident. But confidence built on lies never lasts forever. Daniel Foster stood at the front of the room, organizing several thick files. If those files were in his hands, the evidence had to be overwhelming. The hearing began. One witness after another answered questions. Military procurement officers, financial specialists, command staff. Each testimony revealed another piece of the truth. Unauthorized approvals, missing documentation, abuse of authority. Ryan denied everything. This is a misunderstanding. I followed every regulation. They're twisting the facts. His voice remained calm, but the cracks were beginning to show. Then Olivia was called. She walked slowly toward the witness stand. An officer asked, Major Carter, were you aware of Captain Brooks' activities? She answered honestly, no. Were you personally involved in any illegal decisions? No. Did your personal relationship with Captain Brooks affect your professional judgment? She hesitated. The room became silent. Finally, she whispered, yes. One word. One painful admission. No one accused her of committing a crime. She hadn't stolen documents. She hadn't signed fraudulent contracts. But her judgment, her decisions, her priorities were now under public scrutiny. Watching her answer those questions hurt more than I expected. Not because I wanted to protect her, because I remembered the officer she used to be. Disciplined, respected, trusted. Now she carried the weight of choices she wished she could undo. Then my name was called. I walked toward the witness stand, placed my hand where instructed, and answered every question calmly. When did you first become concerned? I replied, after observing repeated personal contact between Major Carter and Captain Brooks. Were you aware of any criminal activity? No. Did Captain Brooks ever discuss classified information with you? No. Do you believe Major Carter intentionally assisted Captain Brooks? I looked directly at the panel. I have no evidence that she knowingly participated in any misconduct. The prosecutor paused. So you're unwilling to speculate? I answered firmly. I'm here to speak about facts, not assumptions. The room became unusually quiet. I could feel dozens of eyes watching me. I knew I could have added my personal pain. I could have spoken about the betrayal, the hidden messages, the broken marriage. But none of that belonged in this hearing. Justice didn't need my anger. It only needed the truth. When my testimony ended, Colonel Harrison stood before the panel. He looked toward me before speaking. I have supervised this officer for many years. I have trusted him in missions where honesty meant the difference between life and death. He paused. Today, once again, he chose integrity over emotion. That deserves recognition. His words echoed through the courtroom. I lowered my head respectfully. Those few sentences meant more than any medal I had ever received. Ryan suddenly stood. This is unfair. They're all against me. He pointed towards several officers. They're protecting themselves. Daniel Foster calmly opened another file. Without raising his voice, he said, Captain Brooks, these documents contain your electronic approvals. He placed printed emails on the table. These are your financial authorizations. Then he displayed recorded communications. And these are conversations retrieved from official military servers. Ryan's face slowly lost its color. For the first time, he had nothing left to say. The evidence didn't argue. It simply existed. Undeniable. Complete. Final. I glanced toward Olivia. Tears filled her eyes. She wasn't looking at Ryan anymore. She was looking at me. Not with hope. Not expecting forgiveness. Only with regret. In that single moment, she finally understood what had happened. She hadn't lost me because Ryan was a better man. She lost me because she believed a fantasy instead of valuing the person who had stood beside her through every deployment, every hardship, and every sacrifice. Ryan had offered excitement. I had offered loyalty. She chose excitement, and discovered too late that loyalty was far more valuable. As the hearing came to an end, soldiers quietly left the courtroom. Some looked relieved, others disappointed. I walked toward the exit without saying a word. Behind me, I heard someone softly call my name. Please. It was Olivia. I stopped for only a second, but I didn't turn around. Some conversations belong to the past. Some truths arrive too late. And some chapters can only end when you find the strength to keep walking forward without looking back. Several months passed after the hearing. Life finally settled into a quiet rhythm. I focused on my work. I spent more time with the men and women in my unit. I kept attending my counseling sessions with Emma. For the first time in a long while, I could wake up without carrying the weight of yesterday. The memories never disappeared. They simply stopped controlling me. One rainy Saturday afternoon, I was making coffee in my apartment when someone knocked on the door. I wasn't expecting anyone. I opened it and froze. Olivia stood there. For a second, neither of us spoke. She looked nothing like the woman I remembered. Her shoulders were lower. Her eyes looked tired. The confidence that once filled every room had quietly disappeared. She forced a small smile. Hi. I answered softly. Hi. She looked down. I know I should have called first. I understand if you don't want to see me. I stayed silent. Then I stepped aside. You came all this way. You should come in. She walked inside slowly. The apartment was quiet. Simple. Peaceful. She looked around before whispering. It suits you. I poured 2 cups of coffee. Neither of us touched them. Finally, she took a deep breath. I've practiced this conversation 100 times. She laughed weakly through her tears. But now that I'm here, I don't know where to begin. I looked at her calmly. Then start with the truth. She nodded. I owe you that. For a long moment, she simply stared at her hands. Then the words finally came. I confused unfinished memories with real love. Her voice trembled. When Ryan came back, I thought I was getting a second chance. I convinced myself there were feelings I needed to understand. Tears rolled down her face. But they weren't feelings. They were memories. I was chasing someone who no longer existed. She wiped her eyes. And while I was chasing the past, I destroyed the life we had built together. I listened without interrupting. She looked at me. Losing you changed everything. I finally understood what loyalty really looked like. You never made me compete. You never lied to me. You stood beside me through every deployment, every difficult day, and I threw that away. The room became quiet again. I stared into my coffee. Part of me still remembered the woman I married. The woman who laughed with me on long drives. The woman who waited for me after dangerous missions. The woman who once promised that home wasn't a place. It was wherever we were together. Those memories still lived inside me. But another memory stood beside them. An empty dining table, cold dinner, burned out anniversary candles, and a message that read, "Soon we won't have to hide anymore." Some wounds never truly disappear. Olivia looked at me carefully. I don't expect you to take me back. I know I don't deserve that. She struggled to finish the sentence. I needed you to know how sorry I am. I'll regret my choices for the rest of my life. I slowly nodded. I believe you. She looked surprised. You do? Yes. I believe you're sorry. She began crying again. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Rain tapped gently against the windows. Finally, she whispered, Can you ever forgive me? I closed my eyes. That question had lived inside me for months. Not because I wanted revenge, because I didn't know whether forgiveness was possible. Emma once told me something during one of our sessions. Forgiveness isn't something you give to another person. It's something you give yourself when you're ready to stop carrying the pain. I finally understood what she meant. I looked directly into Olivia's eyes. Then I said the words I never thought I would speak. I forgive you. She covered her mouth as tears streamed down her face. Hope briefly appeared in her eyes. But before she could say anything, I continued. But forgiveness doesn't rebuild broken trust. The hope slowly disappeared. I'll never hate you. I don't want to spend my life carrying anger. But the marriage we had, it ended the day you stopped choosing us. She nodded slowly. I know. I just needed to hear the truth. I smiled sadly. We both did. She stood up. For a second, I thought she might ask for one more chance. She didn't. Instead, she quietly walked toward the door. Before leaving, she turned back. You deserved better. I answered honestly. So did you. She looked confused. I continued. You deserve the wisdom to appreciate what you already had. Another tear rolled down her cheek. I'm sorry. I know. She opened the door, then paused one last time. I really did love you. I took a slow breath. I know. But sometimes, love isn't enough when trust is gone. She nodded. Then she walked away. I watched her disappear into the rain. For years, I thought closure meant getting the answers I wanted. That day, I realized closure was something completely different. It was accepting that some people become part of your story, without remaining part of your future. As I closed the door and looked around my quiet apartment, I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel regret. Only peace. Because for the first time since our anniversary, I wasn't looking behind me anymore. I was finally ready to walk toward whatever waited ahead.